Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Closer Look broadcast. I'm Russell Freeman. I'm a professor of health science at American University in Vietnam, and today we're going to take a closer look at travel writing. Is it just about traveling and writing? Now, this podcast is to explain how and why travel writing is fun, and it's a meaningful activity as well for Vietnamese people, but also for anyone, especially students. Now, most of us older folks remember the only way for us to know about new and unknown places was through travel agents or brochures or the encyclopedia, National Geographic, and Lonely Planet type guides. But nowadays, most of our information comes from the internet, either travel bloggers, travel shows, or chat rooms. To find a good book on the subject, not so common. But our guest today is an exception. He's the author of a new book entitled Postcards from China, Travels Along the Grand Canal. And I am so pleased to welcome the author, AUV Professor David Pickus, to help us understand the ins, outs, and value of travel writing. David, welcome to our show.
Thank you for inviting me.
David, first I'd like to know, how was it that you took on this kind of a project to begin with?
Well, I've always been interested in traveling, and I study history and I study societies. So the two things fit together. I like to travel, and I like to think about how what I see is a product of a long series of developments.
And the writing part of it, is it different than, say, blogging or vlogging or writing a letter home to tell people about your experience?
Yes, it is, although some people's blogging or vlogging could be like travel writing. But the thing to keep in mind is travel writing is a distinct kind of literature that developed at a particular point in history. It came at a time when people were trying to combine two different things. One, their stories of adventures set in different exotic locales or places that we're not used to seeing. And on the other side, there's things like textbooks and history books that describe what happened, when, and how. Travel writing is exactly in the middle. It's not a made-up story, but it's not just a textbook. It's your own personal story and your understanding of the civilizations you see around you.
What a great way to think about it. You used a term which was literature, which I've never heard applied to the idea of travel or travel writing, that it actually could be a literary work instead of just a bunch of words explaining how to get there and what restaurants to go to. Now, that's about the difference in writing, but what about the difference in traveling? What's the difference in just traveling for fun and recording your experience as compared to traveling to write something about a place?
Well, the difference isn't, I think, some kind of thing that you'll brag about. Like, there's no reason if somebody's traveling to some place why they can't just have fun and post things on social media. There's nothing bad about doing that, and it's not a competition. But there is a difference if you have a particular project in mind. If you're going about it with travel writing in mind, then the traveling serves the purpose of you recording your own self-development. By self-development, I mean your increased understanding of what you're seeing and how you fit together the pieces of information.
That's interesting. You know, I would have never used the term self-development in this context, but having had so much travel experience myself and knowing the effect it had on my personal self-development, it really rings a bell with me. I appreciate that concept very much. Now, most of the travel information that people access these days is using multimedia. It's on YouTube and places like that. And how do these multimedia and selfies and posting on the internet, how does that change the experience of both traveling and traveling for writing? Or is the writing part completely separate from all those modalities?
I have a strong opinion on this. I've done some videos that are now on YouTube, which are essentially multimedia explorations of travel and different civilizations. I like these kinds of things. I strongly support doing it, and I think they could be extremely educational, but they're not the same as travel writing, and I don't think we should try to say that the two things have no fundamental difference. Here's the fundamental difference. It's about the nature of writing. Writing is thinking in slow motion. When you write, you have to slow down and decide for yourself, what do I want to say exactly? Travel writing, therefore, is thinking about your traveling carefully in terms of the words you use to describe it.
Wow, that's an amazing concept. You're making me think about so many things in such a richer way than I ever did. So are there personal benefits? What's the personal value of travel writing as compared to just traveling and having a good time?
Well, just the same way, I don't think that there's any reason to say travel writing is better than vlogging or that one thing is better than another. The point of getting a personal benefit is not a competition. So the point isn't to do, say, the bravest thing or the most exciting thing that you could do. The point for travel writing in terms of personal development is progressive understanding. When I started out early in the stages of writing the book, I both didn't know that much about the thing I was studying, which was China's system of canals, but I also didn't know as much about myself, my own relationship to traditional Chinese civilization and where I saw it going. Step by step, I started to learn more, and travel writing was the means for this process.
How did you choose that particular subject, and why did you end up writing a book rather than doing writing and these other media options at the same time?
There are two answers to that, one outside myself, one within myself. The one outside myself is something that no one could control. These are just things you have to wait for and work for. There was a Chinese academic publisher, a university publisher, that's interested in a book on this subject. But what came from myself was this, Russell. There's a big two of Chinese civilization artifacts. One of them every single person knows. A second one is barely understood no matter how important it is. What everyone knows is everyone knows the Great Wall. There's stories even about how you can see the Great Wall from space. False, by the way. But the Grand Canal held Chinese civilization together for well over 1,000 years. And of course, it's not completely unknown, but it's not as recognized as the Grand Canal. So the reason I chose it was precisely because I like things that are familiar, but which we don't understand as well.
If you had been traveling for pleasure, would you have derived the same depth or pleasure of experience, if I can use that term, that you did by traveling and doing a travel writing project?
I'm afraid I don't. This is kind of a teacher-like thing for me to say, but there's a German saying, Genießen macht gemein, which means if you enjoy yourself too much, something's going wrong. And your point is, if I had done it just for traveling for pleasure, I wouldn't have stuck with it, Russell. I wouldn't have kept going. It's hard to understand a system of waterworks. It's hard to understand the connections between the present and the past. And I don't have anything against it. It's I'm not an anti-vacation kind of guy. But if you were just traveling to see something exciting that you could post on your social media, I don't think that you would have the focus. What I learned from traveling on the Grand Canal is things that seemed a little tedious or dry at the beginning got more and more interesting.
And so the last question I want to ask you is, what was your purpose? Were you directing it towards a certain audience for entertainment or information, or was it to tune into your own thoughts and feelings and share those with the public? I want you to hold on to that thought, because we're going to cover that in our next episode. David, thanks for coming today. And thank you for our audience for listening today and being your healthiest and happiest self. Bye now.